Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. This week's video, I want to talk about how to shop for a modified car. Now, for those of you out there looking to buy a modified car, I figure there's really about two groups. The first group is a group that's actually looking to buy a modified car. You're looking for one where they've already done the suspension and tuned it up to as fast as you can possibly get, and you just want to buy the car, drive it, and enjoy it without having to worry about doing the research as to which parts you want, having to do the installation, making sure the car is properly tuned and balanced. You just want one that's already put together and ready to go, and that's great. The second group of people are probably the people looking for a modified car because, well, they really have no other option. They're shopping for either a legacy car or a legendary car, like, you have the Supras, the RX7s, 240SXs, 350Zs, any of those other cars that typically tend to attract our type of crowd. Inevitably, those cars have changed hands a couple times, and more than likely it's ended up with someone like you or me that has already modified it. So finding one of those cars in dead stock condition is either impossible or extremely expensive. So in this video, I want to discuss what you should do when looking to buy a modified car. The first thing you want to do when you're taking a look at buying a modified car is, well, the same thing you'd be doing if you were buying any other car, and that is you're gonna want to speak to the owner. Now, in this instance, I heavily recommend going private party. The reason why is, yes, there are car lots out there that will sell modified cars or even specialize in modified cars. The problem is the salesmen on those car lots are going to know the absolute minimum of what it is they need to know about those cars just to sell them to you. Whereas when you buy a modified car from a private party, they're going to know all the quirks and things about the car that you're going to need to know before you buy it. So once you've found a car that's for sale, private party, of course you're going to speak to the owner. And I usually start off by asking simple questions. I'm going to be asking things like, well, what parts are on the car? When did you put them on? How many miles are on them? And more importantly, why did you pick those parts? And what you're trying to feel out is, what is the level of competency of this builder? Are they somebody that just saw a shiny part on eBay, thought it was cool, and slapped it on their car? Or have they watched Fast and Furious a couple times and decided they wanted NOS and they have no idea what they're doing with it? So by asking these questions, you should be able to figure out also what the goal of the car was. Were they building as a canyon car, autocross, drift, whatever? And you're going to be able to get more comfortable that the person who built the car knew what they were doing. The next thing you want to do is ask what I call the stupid questions. Now, these are the questions that most 14 to 16-year-olds ask whenever they see a modified car. Oh my God, how much drifting have you done? Have you done any intersection takeovers? What about roll racing? All these things that people typically do that abuse their car. And what you want to see is just how hyped the person gets on these particular events. If they start to get really excited about intersection takeovers, about drifting, even though it's obvious they've never been to a track, you're going to get the idea that this car's been probably pretty well abused and not well maintained. Whereas if the person's more like, well, no, I just kind of built this car because I want to have fun on the canyons on weekends, or occasionally I go up to the track, or there's an autocross event, you're going to get the idea that this person not only knew how to build their car, but they didn't overly abuse it beyond the limits of what the car is built for. After you're finished speaking with the seller and you're fairly confident they were competent enough to modify the car to the level it's at now, the next thing you want to do is ask for documentation. Now, anybody that's been building a car for a while will typically have what's called a build sheet. For me, my build sheets are Excel spreadsheets I keep on my computer at home, where I list every part I put on the car, at what date, what mileage, how much the part cost, and who did the work. And if it wasn't me, how much the labor costs. Now, this build sheet is going to be great because typically there's going to be stuff on there they didn't think to tell you about, like maybe they did the gaskets on the water pump, or maybe they replaced some O-rings or some bushings that typically aren't that exciting, but still it's on the list. So not only will you see everything that's done to the car and what date and mileage, you're also going to get an idea of what the maintenance of the car was like. Now, if they don't have this build sheet, is it a deal breaker? No, it's just something that's nice to have, because as a builder, if I go to a car show, it's great to just put it on the dash. It helps the judges figure out what's all been done to the car so I can get my points quickly. Or if I tend to watch my list, because there might be some parts I'm like, wow, that's been on there for a while. Maybe I should swap it out for a new part. Or in this case, you're selling the car. It makes it much easier to sell the car because all that information is right there for the buyer. However, like I said, if they don't have the build sheet, it's not necessarily a deal breaker. However, what you should get, if they have the build sheet or not, is receipts. Now, receipts are important because it proves that everything that's on the car is what the seller claims, because it's very easy to lie when it comes to modified cars. How easy is it to take a look at the car and go, ooh, there's a Turbonetics turbo, and the seller's like, oh yeah, I put that on like 100 miles ago and maybe a couple months is practically brand new. When in truth, he bought it off his buddy 6 years ago and it had 80,000 miles on the turbo before he bought it from his buddy. You're not gonna know that for sure unless there's receipts to prove it, and don't take anything anyone sells when selling a car as truth. For example, when I picked up this R35, one of my big things is I wanted to make sure that the transmission fluid had been done. The reason why is it's one of the more expensive maintenance costs of the car. If you do it yourself, it can cost you anywhere from $600 to $800, and if you pay Nissan to do it, whew, I don't even want to know how much they charge to do it. So in that, I wanted to make sure it was done. Now, when I went to go see the car, the salesperson told me that they had the receipt, but when I got there, they mysteriously lost that receipt. So I have to take it on faith that that work was done and he dropped that much money on the transmission fluid. I'm not that trusting. So that means that I'm gonna probably be doing the transmission fluid on this car fairly soon. And of course, I'll make a video about that in the near future. But either way, whether they have the build sheet or not, make sure they have receipts for all the parts that they claim are on the car. The next step that you're gonna do is the fun one. I mean, you're comfortable with the seller. He's proved that he's had the documents, that everything that's on the car is exactly what he claims it to be. You're gonna go look at the car and you're gonna pop the hood and just take a moment and enjoy the view. Enjoy all the shiny bits, all the go fast pieces, you know, the aluminum hi-hats, whatever level of modification he's done to this car. And if he's done it well, enjoy looking at the candy aisle that is that engine bay. Try not to look too excited though, because you are going to probably want to try and negotiate the price down a little bit. And if you look too excited, they're going to be less likely to move. However, after you've had a chance to appreciate all the stuff that's been done to the car, take a step back, regroup yourself, and take a closer look. And what it is you're looking at is the quality of the work that's been done to the car. You want to make sure this wasn't a person that cut corners. Usually a dead giveaway of cutting corners is there's going to be RVT in certain spots, particularly things like the oil return line, because they're trying to hide oil leaks. And instead of fixing it properly, they just kind of slapped a Band-Aid on it, which is typically RVT. You also want to take a look to make sure that they didn't kind of like half-ass anything. Like, this is actually a true story, and it's funny because it's been true for both of my Mark IV Supras. I actually found duct tape holding stuff together. I mean, to me, that's just ridiculous. This is a Mark IV Supra. You'd think the owners would take better care of them than they do. Yet, under both Mark IV Supras I've had, I found duct tape. Now, there's gonna be other things too, like, you know, maybe there's wires in the engine bay and they didn't wrap them in electrical tape. You know, they just let them sit out there all spaghetti style. And it lets you know that maybe they got a little lazy, but their build quality might not be that bad. But still, it's just things you want to take note of and maybe point out to negotiate the price down. Branching off of taking a closer look at their work to make sure they didn't really cut corners when they were making installations is also take a look at how the car was maintained. There's a big joke in the automotive community about how there's always money to buy a brand new turbo, but there never seems to be money to repair your car when it breaks. It's very easy to drop $300 on a teal blow-off valve, but for some reason when your coil pack fries, you don't have the money to fix it. So you want to take a look at how the car is maintained, because you don't want to go home and find you have a whole bunch of things that need to be repaired on the car. For me, the two main things I take a look at are the windshield wiper reservoir and the alignment. Now, I know what you might be thinking, the windshield wiper reservoir, why would I look at that? I mean, you can run the windshield wiper reservoir empty for the entire life of the car, and it's not going to affect how the car runs. And you're right, you can do that. But for me, what it tells me is that if the person was so meticulous in their maintenance of their car that they paid attention to that, that means that if there's any other little tick or thing that was wrong with the car, they probably fixed it right away. The reason why I look at the alignment is the alignment's more expensive than the windshield wiper reservoir. You know, where you can get windshield wiper fluid for what, $10 at AutoZone, an alignment's gonna run you about $200 or more. And it's one of those things that you can run with a bad alignment and it's not really gonna destroy the car, it's just gonna destroy your tires. Which means if somebody's sitting there with a dilemma of like, ooh, I can get a brand new HKS exhaust or I can get my car aligned, more than likely, they're gonna go with the exhaust because it's loud and it's fun and it may add a little bit more speed. So if the person's got a full windshield wiper reservoir and their car is properly aligned, it lets me know that they didn't just concentrate on the go fast bits, they also concentrate on making sure the car was well maintained and running at its peak level. At this point, I'm sure you're thinking, well, okay, I've talked to the seller. He seems like he knows what he's talking about. I'm fairly confident he knew what he was doing when he built the car. He's got receipts to prove that everything that he claimed is on the car is on the car. And I took a look at it and it looks like it's pretty solid. It's a good time to buy the car, right? Well, not quite. There's one last step I heavily recommend, and I save it for last because this one's gonna cost you a little bit of money, where the other stuff before this doesn't cost you anything. If you are this sold on the car and you're confident on it, I still heavily recommend you take it to either a certified mechanic or a mechanic that you know and trust. The reason why is there's gonna be stuff that they're gonna catch that you're not, because they're able to take a closer look. Most importantly, you want to get a compression and leak down test, because when you drive the car or just look at it, you're not going to know whether or not there's bad compression on the 4-cylinder. You're not going to know that without the compression and leak down test, even if you take it for a drive, because you haven't driven the car before. Maybe you're not used to a car with this much power, where the turbo is going to compensate for the lack of power from the bad compression in one of the cylinders. So by spending, like, I think it's around $200 to take the car to a mechanic to check it out, you're saving yourself from the horror story of getting home with this brand new car that you're all excited about, just to find out that you've got bad compression and you're looking at dropping thousands on either a new engine or a full rebuild. And that's why I recommend that you take every car to a certified mechanic before you buy it. And there they are. Those are the steps that I would take when shopping for a modified car. Now, of course, these are suggestions I make doing on top of what you typically do when shopping for any used car. I mean, obviously take the car for a test drive. If you like to check specific things, like maybe you check the shocks and springs, maybe you check the pinch welds to make sure that they're not damaged, do that as well. It's just, these were suggestions I added to do on top of your typical buying experience. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go hit that thumbs up button to let me know. It does help the channel out a lot. If you'd like to see more automotive, particularly GTR content in the future, go and subscribe to my channel. You can now follow me on all forms of social media, which include Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. I'll leave links to all those in the description down below. If you'd like to support the channel, I do have the JD Archer shop. If you go to jdarcher.bigcartel.com, I do have a limited selection of hats, t-shirts, and hoodies I've designed. If you have any questions or you feel there's anything I've missed in this video, go and post in the comment section down below. I will respond to you. I thank you all for watching. Until next time, forget everything else, focus on the finish line.